Imagine waking up, stepping onto your porch, sipping your morning coffee, and discovering that overnight, your entire ranch now apparently belongs to the neighborhood. No fire, no robbery, no natural disaster. Just a letter, one thin sheet of paper, claiming that your 50 acres of private land have been reclassified as community property by an HOA you've never joined, never paid, and never even met. That was my morning. According to them, my fields were now public recreation space. My fences were unauthorized barriers. And my ranch, my family's ranch, was suddenly open for hiking, picnics, dog walking, and whatever else the community felt entitled to. I remember staring at that letter and thinking, how in the world can strangers just vote themselves ownership of my land? That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hostile takeover disguised as paperwork, and I was about to make them regret every word of it. Before we get into this madness, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you love chaotic HOA revenge stories, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. When the HOA sedan rolled up my driveway like it owned the place, I already knew this wasn't some clerical mix-up. You don't send a squad car-looking vehicle with a giant logo plastered on the side unless you're trying to intimidate someone. And HOA people, real HOA people, are experts at pretending they're government officials. The sedan braked in a little puff of dust, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been stuffed into her blazer with a tire pump. Rounded face, lips pursed so tight they could have cut plastic posture, stiff with self-importance. I didn't need an introduction. I could smell the entitlement from 10 feet away. She marched up my driveway with a clipboard clutched to her chest like it was the Constitution. 2 other board members trailed behind her, overdressed, overconfident, and carrying the facial expressions of people who had never done a day of manual labor in their lives. "Mr. Monroe," she announced as if reading my name off a warrant. "I'm Margaret Dawson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. We sent you a letter regarding the community land designation." She said designation like she was unveiling a new shopping mall, not stealing a man's property. I crossed my arms. I didn't say anything, not yet. I let the silence breathe until it made them uncomfortable. People like Margaret aren't used to being ignored. They're used to being obeyed. "Well," she asked, tapping her clipboard, "we'd like to discuss the next steps." I raised an eyebrow. "Next steps, yes," she said, with a patronizing smile. "Your land has now been incorporated into the HOA jurisdiction due to historical community usage. So, we will need your cooperation in removing any private property, signage barriers," and I held up a hand. "Hold on. Did you say incorporated into your HOA, my land?" "Yes," she repeated, slow and sugary, as if explaining rain to a toddler. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not a normal laugh. One of those loud, sharp, I cannot believe how stupid this situation is laughs. Margaret's smile tightened. "I understand this may be surprising, Mr. Monroe, but I assure you it is all completely legal. Our members have long enjoyed walking, sightseeing, and recreational activities on your ranch, and the board has recognized this historical use by officially adopting it into our community plan." "Historical use," I repeated. "Lady, the only historical thing happening on this ranch is livestock and sweat. Nobody has ever hiked here, except maybe a stray cow." The man behind her, tall, thin, nervous, cleared his throat. "I've personally walked through your eastern pasture many times. Beautiful view." I stared at him. "You walked through my pasture," he nodded. "Yes, well, the HOA shared a community map that included, which is trespassing," I said flatly. Margaret cut in with a laugh so fake, it sounded like it hurt her. "Oh, Mr. Monroe, I think you're misunderstanding. Once incorporated, community members may use the land responsibly as part of the shared environment. This fosters unity and neighborhood cohesion." I took a slow step closer, not aggressive, not threatening, just close enough that she had to look up at me. "You mean to tell me you and your little committee took a vote, and that vote gave you the right to claim my land? A vote among yourselves?" Margaret tilted her head. "To the community, yes. Not to the community," I said. "To you. You voted to steal my land." Her lips pinched together. She wasn't used to being talked to like that. "Let me put it plainly," she said. "The community has decided your ranch is part of our jurisdiction. It's time you cooperate with the transition." The transition. Like my land was switching cable providers. Before I could answer, a silver SUV pulled into my driveway. Doors flew open, and a family of 4 spilled out: mom, dad, 2 kids, and a golden retriever trotting proudly ahead as if he owned the place. They waved cheerfully at Margaret. She waved back like a queen greeting her subjects. "What the hell?" I muttered. The dad threw a frisbee to his son and said, "We heard the HOA opened up the ranch for recreational use. Figured we'd come check it out. Check it out. My land. My private land." They started walking right toward my pasture. "Whoa, hey," I shouted, marching toward them. "What do you think you're doing?" The dad blinked at me like I was the intruder. "Using the community space. It is not community space," I snapped. "This is my ranch." "But the HOA said," the mother started. "I don't give a damn what the HOA said," I growled. "Get off my property." The dad scratched his head. "There's no need to be rude, buddy." Buddy, the audacity. I was about 2 seconds from physically escorting them out when Margaret placed a hand on my shoulder. The gesture was so presumptuous, I nearly shook her off on instinct. "Jack," she said sweetly, as if we'd been friends for years. "This is exactly what we were talking about, community members enjoying their space together." I shrugged her hand off like brushing away a wasp. Their space, their space. More cars rolled in, SUVs, minivans, even a convertible with a cooler strapped to the back. People stepped out carrying picnic baskets, portable grills, folding chairs, like they were heading to a 4th of July festival. Kids ran around chasing each other. A couple set up a volleyball net. Someone started flying a kite on my land. I felt something inside me snap in half. I turned back to Margaret. "Get these people off my property. Now." She widened her eyes in a theatrical display of innocence. "Jack, there's no need for hostility. This transition will be much smoother if you cooperate." "I'm not cooperating with a damn thing," I said, through clenched teeth. "And if you don't get off my land in 5 seconds, I will personally escort you down the driveway using a garden hose." That got her. Her smug expression flickered just a bit before snapping back into place. "We will escalate this matter," she snapped, turning sharply on her heel. Her board members scurried behind her like anxious ducklings. The trespassers, sensing something was off, slowly packed up their picnic gear. The golden retriever gave me a confused look as he trotted back to the SUV. Margaret climbed into her sedan and glared at me through the window. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," I grinned. Not pleasantly, not politely. A slow, mean grin. "You'll be hearing from my shotgun," I said. The car pulled away in a hurry. And as the dust settled, I realized something important. This wasn't just a dispute. This wasn't just Karen behavior. This was war, a land war, and I would fight it with every ounce of stubbornness my grandfather had passed down to me. What I didn't know was just how far the HOA was willing to go, or how deeply I'd need to dig to protect everything my family had built. But right then and there, standing in my driveway with anger boiling under my skin, I made a promise. They wanted a community asset. I'd give them a lesson in community electricity. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I was eager to start the day. No, I barely slept. My mind replayed the image of strangers roaming my ranch like tourists in a national park. Every time I tried to close my eyes, I saw someone kicking a soccer ball onto my pasture or setting up a grill near my barn. It was like my brain had developed PTSD from community potlucks. I stepped outside with a cup of black coffee and scanned the fields, half expecting a jogger to leap out from behind a hay bale. For a moment, everything looked peaceful, quiet. My land exactly the way it always was. Then I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A minivan. A bright blue minivan. It rolled slowly down my driveway like it was pulling into a reserved parking space. I narrowed my eyes as it came to a stop near the fence line. The door slid open, and a pack of children spilled out like popcorn, laughing, shouting, immediately sprinting toward my fields. "Not again," I muttered under my breath. The mom stepped out next, sunglasses, the size of pancakes, yoga pants, messy bun, holding 2 iced coffees, and a leash attached to an enormous golden doodle. She waved at me cheerfully. "Hi, the HOA said the ranch is open for morning playgroups." Playgroups. My patience cracked like a dry twig. "No," I said, walking toward her. "No playgroups. Not here. Not now. Not ever. This is private property." She blinked, genuinely confused. But we saw the announcement on the HOA app. Something about new community recreation areas. I took a slow breath, counting to 3 before I said something that would end with the sheriff being called. "The HOA lied," I said. "This ranch is not community property. It is not part of the HOA. It is mine." Her smile faltered. "But Margaret said it was approved." "Margaret, of course." I pointed toward her children. "Please get your kids off my land." She hesitated because, in her mind, if the HOA said something, it must be gospel. But eventually she clicked her tongue, called the kids back, and loaded them into the van. "I'm going to talk to Margaret," she said sternly, like I had inconvenienced her. Then she drove off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a small mountain of frustration. But I didn't even have time to recover before the next car arrived. This time, it was a group of teenagers in a dented pickup truck. They parked crookedly, hopped out laughing, carrying backpacks and a drone. "You boys lost?" I asked. "Nope," the tallest one said proudly. "We're doing a filming project. The HOA said this ranch is a designated scenic area." Now I nearly dropped my coffee. A scenic area?" he repeated as if I were deaf. "For community photography and outdoor recreation," I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Get off my land." One of them raised his hands defensively. "Dude, relax. We're not hurting anything. Get off my land." They backed up, climbed into their truck, and peeled out of there so fast they nearly forgot the drone on the ground. I picked it up and tossed it into the bed of their truck as they sped off. By mid-morning, I had turned away a yoga class, a dog-walking group, and a guy with a metal detector looking for relics. Apparently, Margaret had gone full dictator mode and posted a community-wide announcement claiming my ranch as the newest HOA feature. I didn't know whether to laugh or break something, but the final straw, the absolute final straw, happened around noon. I was fixing the latch on my barn door when I heard music. Loud music, like someone was hosting a barbecue. I turned the corner, and there he was, a heavy-set man in a tank top standing next to a smoker he had hauled onto my property. He flipped a rack of ribs with a pair of tongs and nodded at me casually. "Hey man," he said, "you want some?" HOA said this is a designated grill-friendly zone. I stared at him. A grill-friendly zone. Yeah. Margaret said it was part of the new park expansion. I paused for a long time, a very long time. Then I said, "You have 10 seconds to get that smoker off my land before I drag it to the highway myself." He blinked at me, unsure if I was joking. I was not joking. He packed up quickly. By the time the afternoon sun dipped low, I felt like a full-time security guard patrolling a place that didn't even need guarding until yesterday. Every few minutes, another car slowed down the driveway before turning around once they saw me standing there, like a bouncer. I realized something crucial then. If I didn't put an end to this soon, they would never stop. Margaret wasn't just testing boundaries, she was declaring war by proxy. She was turning the entire neighborhood into pawns and sending them onto my property like a slow but steady invasion. So I grabbed my phone and took photos, dozens of them. Cars, people, activities, every single unauthorized entry, anything that could help later. And then, right when I thought the chaos had finally ended, she showed up. A white Lexus SUV. Clean, polished, judgmental, as if the vehicle itself disapproved of my existence. It parked right in front of me. The door opened, and out stepped the queen of chaos herself, Margaret Dawson, blazer, clipboard, sunglasses so dark they could block out morality itself. She walked toward me with that same superiority she always carried, as if gravity obeyed her differently than everyone else. "Mr. Monroe," she said dryly, "we've been hearing concerns about your behavior toward community members today." "My behavior?" I repeated, voice low. "My behavior, yes," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard. "Multiple residents reported hostility, unauthorized obstruction of community access, and aggressive conduct unbecoming of a cooperative neighbor." I stared at her, then I laughed. A slow, humorless laugh. "You send people onto my land, and then you accuse me of obstructing access?" She nodded, completely serious. "Yes, this is community land now." "No," I said. "This is my land, and you are trespassing." She sighed dramatically. "Jack the board voted, I don't care about your board." "Well," she said, narrowing her eyes, "the community does. And we will continue moving forward with our integration plan, whether you approve or not." Integration plan. Like my ranch was being annexed by a foreign government. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You think you can just declare my land part of your HOA? We already have," she said smugly. "And you think I'm going to sit back and let strangers wander through my ranch like it's a petting zoo?" "Yes," she said simply. And that was it. The moment everything crystallized. The moment my anger turned into something sharper determination. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Margaret, listen carefully. This land is mine, not yours, not the HOA's, mine. And anyone who comes onto it without permission is trespassing." She smirked. Not for long. Then she turned and walked to her Lexus without another word, leaving tire tracks of arrogance behind her. I watched her drive away, fists tight at my sides, heart pounding with a mixture of fury and adrenaline. Something had to be done. No more warnings. No more polite conversations. They wanted to act like this land was theirs. Fine. I'd teach them what happens when someone tries to take what belongs to me. And the next move I planned? Well, let's just say it would change the entire neighborhood forever. I didn't waste a second after Margaret's Lexus disappeared down the driveway. I stormed inside my house and grabbed my phone like it was a weapon. If she wanted a war, then she'd damn well get one, and I knew exactly who to call. Curtis McGraw. Curtis wasn't just a lawyer. He was a legend. The kind of man HOAs whispered about in their meetings whenever someone muttered the words overreach or lawsuit. He was the boogeyman of tyrannical neighborhood boards. And fortunately for me, he happened to be my friend. He picked up on the first ring. "Jack," he said, voice smooth and bored, like he was expecting this call. "Tell me which flavor of stupidity they pulled this time. They're claiming my entire ranch is community property." Curtis didn't say anything for a good 3 seconds. Then he whistled. "Damn. They really spun the wheel and landed on grand theft acreage, didn't they?" "Oh, it gets better," I said, pacing the living room. "They've been telling the whole neighborhood my ranch is a public recreation area. I've had minivans, yoga classes, drone kids, a barbecue guy. Hell, Margaret basically held a meet and greet on my front pasture." Curtis burst into laughter. "Your ranch, a public park. God, I wish I could have seen your face. This isn't funny." "You're right," he said. "It's hilarious. And also illegal. Very illegal." I stopped pacing. "So, what do I do?" Curtis's tone sharpened instantly. "You fight back. Hard. But you don't fight fair, you fight smart." A silence stretched on the line as I waited for him to continue. "Jack," he said slowly, "if they want to use your land, make that impossible. You need deterrence. Fences, cameras, signage. Everything legal, everything documented." "I already have fences," I said. "Then electrify them." I blinked. "Electrify them. Low voltage, non-lethal, perfectly legal in your county. Just enough to make trespassers rethink their life choices." I felt a grin tug at my lips. It was the first moment of relief I'd felt all day. It wasn't just a plan, it was beautiful. Curtis continued. "Also, start gathering evidence, photos of trespassers, dates, witnesses, and dig into county records. If they filed anything to justify this land grab, I want you to find it." "And then what, then?" he said with a tone that almost sounded excited. "We crush them." After hanging up, I grabbed my keys and headed straight to the county records office. The place smelled like dust and old air conditioning, like every government building on Earth. I approached the counter, and the clerk, a bored young guy eating chips from a paper cup, barely looked up from his phone. "I need all property jurisdiction records for parcel 51B, I said, sliding him the parcel number. He sighed, dramatically typed, slowly, painfully, slowly, then disappeared into the back. 10 minutes later, he returned with a thick folder that looked older than both of us combined. I carried it to a table and flipped it open. There it was, every deed, every boundary, every zoning update, every signature from my grandfather to me, everything proving the land had never been part of any HOA. But then I found something new, something out of place. A form filed 3 weeks ago. Annexation request for community integration, submitted by Margaret Dawson. My jaw clenched. She had filed the paperwork herself. No owner's signature, no vote from landowners, nothing legally binding. Just her signature and a list of fabricated historical community uses, like hiking, bird watching, nature, playgroups, all made up, all bogus. She didn't just bend the rules. She threw them in a wood chipper and wrote her own. And as furious as that made me, it also gave me exactly what I needed. A weapon. I snapped photos of every fraudulent page. Then I drove straight from the records office to the HOA building, a small, pretentious annex attached to the community clubhouse. You know the kind, fake columns, plastic plants, a smell like lemon cleaner, and desperation. Margaret was inside, behind a desk, flipping through papers with smug purpose, as if she were some kind of bureaucratic goddess, ordering the world into shape. She didn't even look up as I walked in. "Jack," she said, in that saccharine voice that made my blood pressure spike, "if you're here to discuss compliance, you'll want form." I slapped a folder onto her desk so hard her pen jumped. She looked up sharply, annoyed. "Excuse you, open it," I said. She huffed, but did it anyway. Inside were copies of the property records, the fraudulent annexation form, the evidence of trespassers, the whole stack of her own lies staring right back at her. Her face went pale. What is this?" she stammered. "This," I said calmly, "is the legal proof that my land was never part of your HOA. This is the proof that you faked an annexation. And this," I tapped the last page, "is the bill you owe me." "Bill?" she gasped. Yes. If you're claiming my property as part of your HOA, then that means my land has been under HOA jurisdiction for 20 years. And that means you owe me 20 years of unpaid HOA dues. I leaned in. The total is $212,000. Margaret's mouth hung open like a stunned fish. One of the male board members behind her nearly dropped his coffee. This is absurd, she whispered. No, I said, what's absurd is you thinking you could steal 50 acres of land with a clipboard and a fantasy map. Her hands trembled slightly. The board will never agree to this. Then I said you find a way to make them. I grabbed my folder and walked out before she could form a response. As I stepped outside, I felt something shift inside me, not just anger, but control. For the first time since this madness began, I felt like I had leverage, power, a weapon against their arrogance. But this war was far from won. That evening I sat on my porch, staring at the boundary lines of my ranch as the sun dipped low. The fields glowed golden quiet except for the breeze. My land, my grandfather's land. And I wasn't about to let anyone take it, not with lies, not with paperwork, not with an army of entitled neighbors. I grabbed a notebook and wrote the first line of my counterattack: install electric fence, full perimeter, low volt, legal, immediate. The second line, prepare for HOA retaliation. Because they would retaliate. People like Margaret didn't accept defeat. They regrouped, reloaded, and came back louder and dumber. But I was ready. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't peaceful clarity. It was the clarity you get right before you charge into battle, when anger sharpens into purpose. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped outside onto my porch. The sky was pink and quiet, the kind of morning that normally made me pause and breathe. But that day, all I saw was a war zone. My fences vulnerable, my property lines under siege, my patience gone. Margaret wanted to play games. Fine, I'd play. But I'd play smarter, harder, and legally, Curtis had given me my first marching order deterrence. And once I get a mission, I don't drag my boots, I go full throttle. By 7 a.m., I was in my truck headed for the hardware supplier 2 towns over. The one that sold serious equipment, not the soft suburban stuff the HOA crowd bought when they wanted to improve curb appeal. No, I needed the kind of gear used by ranchers, hunters, and people who actually understand the dangers of the real world. The moment I walked in, the owner, a bearded guy named Cliff, raised an eyebrow. Jack, everything all right? Nope, I said. I'm getting invaded by yoga moms, picnickers, and a golden doodle uprising. Cliff burst out laughing. Sounds like you've got HOA trouble. Worse, I said. I've got a Karen. His face instantly shifted from amusement to dead seriousness. Say no more. What do you need? Cameras, fencing, motion lights, sensors, trip alarms, all of the above. Everything I said. Especially the kind of fencing that says, turn back before you see Jesus. Cliff grinned. I've got just the thing. He led me to the back where the premium equipment was kept, the stuff locked up behind wire cages. He pulled out spools of industrial-grade electric fence wire, solar-powered controllers, grounding rods, high-voltage warning signs, motion-triggered LED floodlights, and a security camera system with more coverage than a game casino. This setup, Cliff said proudly, is non-lethal but unforgettable. Anyone who touches that fence is going to leap back like they saw the ghost of their last bad decision. Perfect, I said. Load it up. As he stacked the gear in my truck, 2 older ranchers wandered over curious. You finally electrifying that perimeter, one asked. Not by choice, I said. The HOA decided my land belongs to them. They both froze. You're kidding? The shorter one said. Nope. They sent half the neighborhood onto my ranch yesterday. There was a long silence, and then they both shook their heads in disbelief. One of them muttered, "That's how wars start." I nodded. Exactly. On the drive back home, I kept imagining Margaret's face when she discovered I wasn't backing down. I pictured her holding another meeting in her scented living room, rallying the board with a PowerPoint presentation titled something like, How to Steal Land You Didn't Earn, with slides full of bullet points like, Step 1, lie. Step 2, trespass. Step 3, pretend you're the government. The thought actually made me laugh. When I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed a new car parked near my gate. Not a visitor, not a local. It was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, the kind pretentious people drive when they want to look important. My stomach tightened. As I got out, the driver door opened, and out stepped a man wearing a suit so stiff He looked like he'd ironed it while wearing it. He held a leather portfolio and had the aura of someone who spent more time in conference rooms than sunlight. "Mr. Monroe," he asked. "Who's asking?" He cleared his throat. "I'm Jonathan Burke, legal counsel for the Willow Creek HOA. "Oh, wonderful. Margaret must have pressed the panic button last night. "What do you want?" I asked. He adjusted his glasses. "I'm here to present the HOA's formal position regarding the land integration process." I stared at him. "Integration? You mean theft?" "The HOA does not agree with that characterization," he said stiffly. "Yeah, well, the law will." He opened the portfolio and slid a paper toward me. "This is an official cease and desist notice. You are to remove the obstructive fencing and refrain from interference as the community transitions into shared use of the property." I didn't laugh out loud, but I came close. "You're kidding." "No. And failure to comply could result in legal action." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Let me make something real clear. This land is mine. My grandfather built it. I maintain it. I pay the taxes. And your HOA's delusion doesn't change a damn thing." He swallowed. "Mr. Monroe, the board believes the annexation is valid." "I don't care what they believe," I said. "Belief isn't law. Facts are law. Property records are law. And you don't have any of them on your side." He hesitated. I could see it now. He didn't fully believe in Margaret's crusade. He was just hired to look official. "Look," I said calmly, "I'm going to handle this the right way. Why don't you go tell Margaret that instead of stealing land, she should invest in hobbies?" He blinked. "Such as knitting, birdwatching, therapy, anything but leadership." He pressed his lips together. I could tell he wanted to smile, but resisted. "I'll relay your message." "Good," I said. "Oh, and Jonathan, yes, next time you step onto my property without permission, bring hiking boots and a signed waiver. You're going to need both." He promptly got back in his car and left. I wasted no time. I unloaded every box, every spool of electric wire, every metal post. I dragged tools across the dirt, hammered stakes into the ground, and set up solar panels. Every hit of the sledgehammer was therapy. Every metal clang felt like reclaiming my land inch by inch. By midday, the first perimeter was complete. The second by evening, and by sundown I had installed enough voltage to make a raccoon reconsider its life choices. I stood back, sweating, covered in dirt, and grinning like a man who had just built a fortress. Then I flipped the switch. The entire fence hummed to life, a low, steady buzz like the ranch was waking up angry. It felt good. Too good. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I mounted cameras on old fence posts, installed motion trigger lights, set up alarms. My ranch now had better security than half the government offices in the state. That night, while reviewing the camera feeds on my laptop, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Control. For the first time since this HOA nightmare started, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing, building, defending. Margaret thought she could outvote me, outmaneuver me, turn my property into her playground. She had no idea what was coming next. But she'd learn soon enough. Because this was no longer just about fences or trespassers. This was about something bigger. Something Margaret underestimated. A man defending his land. A man with a plan. A man with voltage. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was a spam call, maybe some robot voice telling me I'd won a free cruise. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw over a dozen notifications from my security cameras. Motion alert, motion alert, motion alert. Something or someone was circling my property. I threw on jeans, boots, and a jacket, then hurried outside. The sun had barely crept over the horizon, but my entire fence line was alive with activity. Blue minivans, silver sedans, a pack of SUVs, all idling right outside the boundary like a confused parade. And at the front of this circus stood Margaret Dawson, clipboard in hand, mouth tight, and flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I walked toward the fence, hands stuffed in my pockets, posture calm but coiled. The closer I got, the louder the murmurs became. People were gathered behind Margaret, whispering, anxious, curious, like they were lining up for a show. Margaret stepped forward, clearing her throat dramatically. "Mr. Monroe," she called out, "we need to discuss a serious violation." I cocked my head. "Which one? The violation where you keep sending trespassers onto my land, or the one where you tried to annex 50 acres with a Sharpie?" Her eyes narrowed. "This fence," she jabbed a finger toward the electric wiring, "is a danger to the community. It's only dangerous to thieves," I said, "which means it's basically a service. There was a ripple of laughter among the crowd. Margaret shot them a deadly glare, and the chuckles died instantly. "We are demanding," she said firmly, "that you remove this electric fencing immediately. It violates HOA safety standards." I raised my eyebrows. "Funny, since I'm not in your HOA." "That is disputed," she snapped. "Not by anyone who can read," I replied. Her nostrils flared. "Jack, this fence poses a risk." "No, Margaret," I cut her off. "What poses a risk is you telling the entire neighborhood that my land is a public amusement park." She stiffened lips pressed together. "The board believes—" "The board," I said, "is about to owe me $200,000. Her expression faltered just for a second, but enough that everyone saw it. A murmur spread through the crowd. "What is he talking about? 200,000? Wait, is this serious?" Margaret's face reddened. "Ignore him," she said sharply. "He's making claims that have no legal basis. I have the paperwork," I announced, lifting the folder slightly. "And anyone here is welcome to see the proof that your beloved HOA president forged an annexation request." Now the murmurs grew louder. People exchanged worried glances. A woman in a floral cardigan whispered. She did what Margaret clutched her clipboard like it was a life raft. "Jack, stop spreading misinformation. We will handle this through legal." "Already did," I said calmly. "You sent me a cease and desist." "My lawyer sent you a counterclaim demanding full back dues, plus insurance, plus land maintenance costs, plus tax contributions. If you want this land so badly, you're going to pay for every inch of it." One of the board members swallowed hard. "Margaret, did you know about this?" "Of course I knew," she said, voice shaking slightly. I acted in the community's best interests. That was a mistake, a catastrophic one. People turned on her instantly. "You lied to us. You said the annexation was approved. You never mentioned fees. My HOA bill is already too high." One man stepped forward red-faced. "I'm not paying extra because you decided to play land baron, Margaret." She tried to speak, but the noise drowned her out. I stood there, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold, with the kind of satisfaction you only get when someone finally experiences the consequences of their own idiocy. Finally, Margaret raised her voice as loud as she could. "This isn't over. It already is," I said quietly. She scowled at me, then spun on her heel and stormed off, leaving the trembling board members to deal with the angry crowd. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. Once the commotion died down, I headed back to the house and called Curtis. He picked up sounding far too chipper for someone who regularly wrestled with legal nonsense. "Well," he asked, "how many people got zapped?" "No one important," I said, but Margaret tried to rally the neighborhood. It backfired. "Oh," Curtis chuckled, "so the coup is weakening." "You could say that." Curtis leaned back in his chair. I could hear it in his voice. "All right, Jack, now it's time for Phase 2. I let out a slow breath. "Phase 2, yes," he said. "The legal chokehold. Make them understand that their entire operation collapses if they keep claiming jurisdiction over land they don't own. Meaning we put financial pressure on them until they crack. If they want your land, they pay for your land. If they want to claim authority, they assume liability. If they want to trespass, they pay damages." A smile pulled at the edges of my mouth. "And if they don't want to pay, then they admit they never had authority in the first place." Damn, I loved this man. After the call, I spent the rest of the day gathering more evidence, photos, timestamps, trespass logs. I wanted everything documented so thoroughly that even a judge who hated ranchers would have no choice but to side with me. By late afternoon, I needed a break, so I drove into town to pick up supplies. As I walked into the general store, I noticed people whispering, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. Apparently, the HOA news traveled fast. An elderly woman, Mrs. Green, from 2 roads over, approached me timidly. "Jack," she said, "I heard what the HOA did." "I'm so sorry," I sighed. "Not your fault." She leaned closer. "I never trusted Margaret. She's always been power-hungry." That was an understatement. As I paid for my groceries, another man approached. This one younger, wearing a ball cap. "Is it true?" he asked. "Did Margaret try to claim your ranch?" "Yes." He shook his head. "Damn, that woman is out of her mind. Listen, if you need help with anything, fences, tools, anything, just give me a call." I thanked him. It felt good to know not everyone in the neighborhood had lost their sanity. But when I stepped outside, something caught my eye. A trio of men in suits stood by a black SUV across the street. They weren't locals, too polished, too stiff, too alert, and they were watching me. I paused. They pretended to look away. Something wasn't right. I snapped a quick photo from the hip and walked to my truck without acknowledging them. As soon as I pulled out, they quietly slipped into their SUV, following me. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the old Miller Bridge, took a sharp left, looped through an orchard, and came out on the highway. I watched in my mirrors as their SUV sped past, confused. Good. They weren't good at tailing people. But the fact they were following me at all, that rattled me, deeply. If Margaret was bringing in outside help, lawyers, investigators, or worse, it meant she was far more desperate than I realized. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about control, image, power, and her ego couldn't handle losing. I returned home just as the sun dipped low. The electric fence hummed gently. The cameras blinked. My land, my fortress, stood tall and secure. And I made a silent vow to myself. If Margaret thought she could escalate this, she hadn't seen anything yet. Because I wasn't just defending my ranch now. I was preparing to take theirs down. By the time the next weekend rolled around, I had settled into a routine of monitoring the cameras like a hawk. Every rustle at the fence line, every passing car, every random cyclist triggered that electric pulse of adrenaline in my chest. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. Because with people like Margaret, it wasn't a matter of if she'd escalate, it was when. And as it turned out, when happened on a bright Saturday morning at exactly 10:13 a.m. I was loading bags of feed into my truck when a string of honks echoed down the gravel drive. At first I thought maybe some lost tourists were turning around, but as the sound grew louder, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. One car, then two, then five, then a whole damn convoy. SUVs, minivans, sedans, pickup trucks, dozens of them rolling down my driveway like they were participating in the world's saddest HOA parade. Music blasting, kids hanging out of windows, people waving folding chairs and coolers like they were heading for a beach day. I froze feed bag in midair. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Then I saw her. Standing proud in the passenger seat of a white Lexus sun hat, the size of a satellite dish clutching a megaphone like she was leading a civil rights march, was Margaret Dawson. She stepped out dramatically once the Lexus parked. Her clothes were pastel pink today, pink cardigan, pink slacks, pink rage bubbling beneath the surface. Every HOA president outfit she owned looked like it was stolen from an Easter brunch. I walked slowly toward the fence, trying very hard not to show how close I was to snapping. Margaret raised her clipboard like it was a holy relic. "Attention community members," she shouted into the megaphone. Half the crowd clapped politely. Others just wanted to know where to set up their picnic blankets. "My fellow residents," she continued, "this is a historic moment. Today marks the first official Willow Creek community picnic on our newly acquired community land." Cheers broke out. I swear I could feel a vein bursting somewhere in my forehead. I stepped up to the fence. "Margaret, turn this circus around and leave." She ignored me completely. "This land belongs to all of us," she declared, pointing dramatically at my ranch, like Moses pointing at the promised land. I wasn't religious, but I was starting to pray for patience. People began unloading grills, speakers, volleyball, nets, kiddie pools, coolers, hammocks, everything you'd bring to a park. Except this wasn't a park. This was my ranch, my land, my responsibility. And then it happened. The moment I both expected and dreaded. Someone ran into the fence. A jogger, headphones on shorts too tight, expensive running shoes, was doing a warm-up jog along the perimeter. Without looking, he cut the corner too close. Snap. He hit the electric wire shoulder first. The zap wasn't lethal, just strong enough to make him rethink every decision that led him to this moment. He yelped like someone had dumped ice water down his spine and jumped back 3 feet, tripping over his own legs before crashing into a picnic basket. Screams erupted. People gasped. A woman dropped a bowl of potato salad and shrieked like I'd electrocuted her child. Margaret froze mid-sentence, microphone squealing. I swear, I tried, really tried not to smile, but one corner of my mouth twitched upward on its own. There was nothing I could do to stop it. The jogger scrambled to his feet, hair standing on end like a cartoon character. What was that? I leaned against the fence casually. That was a legally installed, county-approved, non-lethal electric deterrent. Warning signs are posted every 20 feet. He gaped at me. You electrocuted me." "No, I corrected you. Electrocuted yourself by touching a fence that belongs to someone else." A group of kids chasing a soccer ball stopped mid-run as they reached the fence. The ball bounced toward it. Zap! It hit. The wire sparked lightly and shot backward like it had been launched from a slingshot. The kids screamed and ran to their parents, who immediately began shouting at Margaret. "What kind of picnic is this? You said the fence was temporary. You said it wouldn't be dangerous." Margaret's face went from pink to beet red. "Everyone please remain calm," she said into the megaphone, her voice cracking. "This is just a minor setback. Minor setback." Someone's hot dog flew into the air when their portable grill tipped over in the chaos. A frisbee whizzed past Margaret's head. A folding chair collapsed under a man who had clearly underestimated its weight capacity. It was carnage, and it was beautiful. Finally, Margaret marched toward me fuming. "Turn it off!" she demanded. "No," I said, sipping my coffee. "I warned you. This is illegal," she shrieked. "Already checked," I said. "Perfectly within county code. As long as it's non-lethal, clearly marked and installed on private property." "This is not private," I cut her off with a raised hand. "Margaret, if you say community property one more time, I'm going to ask my lawyer to calculate late fees for the past 20 years. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Behind her, more chaos erupted. Someone tried to retrieve a kite that had drifted too close to the fence. He poked it with a metal camping fork. Zap! The fork flew from his hand like a missile. He screamed. Someone else screamed. Even the dog barked. Margaret looked around at her crumbling army of picnic soldiers. The perfect HOA image she tried so hard to build was falling apart like a stale cookie. "This," she hissed quietly, "isn't over." "Oh," I said with a grin, "it's just beginning." She stormed away, but not before tripping on a cooler someone had left on the ground. The megaphone let out a loud honk as she fell, which sent everyone scrambling again. She picked herself up, hair wild, composure shattered. The picnic disbanded faster than a fire drill. Cars revved, kids cried, grills were dragged half-assembled toward trunks. Within 10 minutes, the entire crowd had fled my driveway, leaving behind tire marks, a broken sandal, 2 juice boxes, and 1 mangled kite. When the last car disappeared, I let out a long breath. I should have felt tired, drained, angry. But instead I felt something else. Justice. Sweet, legal, electrified justice. I went back to the house and pulled up the camera footage. Every moment had been captured in perfect high-definition glory. The trespassing, the chaos, the electric wake-up calls. All of it. Curtis was going to love this. But while the picnic fiasco was a clear win for me, something deep down told me Margaret wouldn't accept defeat so easily. She wasn't the type. She would regroup, plot manipulate, twist, spin, fight tooth and manicured nail. But that was fine, because I had something she didn't: truth, law, evidence, and about 7,000 volts of motivation running around my property line. I saved the latest footage, leaned back in my chair, and took a slow sip of coffee. If Margaret wanted to make this a war, I had only one thing to say. Good. I liked wars. I could win. Monday morning arrived with a strange kind of quiet, the kind that didn't feel peaceful, just wrong. The kind that made you feel like something was hiding behind the next corner waiting to pounce. I knew Margaret wasn't done. No way. A woman like her didn't lose gracefully. She didn't lick her wounds and stay home. She regrouped, plotted, and returned with a vengeance. And she did exactly that. At around 9:30 a.m., I heard the familiar rumble of an engine coming up the driveway. Not a minivan, not a jogger, not some confused picnic enthusiast. It was a white sedan with government plates, or at least plates meant to look government. I stepped onto the porch as it stopped. The door opened, and out stepped 2 men in matching suits, stiff posture, hair perfectly parted, faces devoid of humor. They looked like someone had printed the phrase, "official business," onto 2 humans. One flashed a badge so fast I couldn't even read it. "Mr. Monroe," the first one said, "we're here on behalf of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." I crossed my arms. "You know, flashing fake badges is a crime, right?" His jaw twitched. "These are HOA identification badges," I laughed. "You mean cosplay badges?" He cleared his throat aggressively. "We're investigating multiple complaints filed over the weekend regarding hazardous property modifications." I blinked. "You mean my legal electric fence?" "Yes," he said. "The fence that several residents reported as harmful." "I didn't harm the residents," I said. "The fence did, because they touched it, which means they trespassed. Case closed." He ignored my logic entirely. "We need to inspect the property to verify compliance with community standards." "No," I said. He stiffened. "As representatives of the HOA, you're on private land," I cut him off. "And unless you came with a warrant or a plate of fresh cookies, you can turn right around and get back in your clown car." The second man, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward with a small tablet. "Sir, refusing an HOA compliance inspection may result in further escalation." I leaned in. "You know what else results in escalation? Trespassing." They looked at each other. I could tell neither was prepared for the possibility that someone might just tell them no. HOA people were used to fake power, but power nonetheless, and they expected everyone else to bow to it. "Gentlemen," I said, "I'll make this easy. You see that fence, the one humming with electricity? Touch it. Go ahead. If you survive, you can inspect anything you want." They took a synchronized step backward. "No further questions," the first man said stiffly. "We will report your non-cooperation." "And I'll report your attempted trespass," I replied. "Have a nice day." They retreated faster than deer during hunting season. I watched their car roll back down the driveway, then disappearing into the curve of the road. But something about the encounter gnawed at me. Those suits weren't hired goons or annoying board members. They were outsiders brought in by Margaret. She was escalating, and she wasn't hiding it anymore. I returned to the house, grabbed a protein bar, and pulled up the security feeds. The men in suits had lingered at the end of my property, talking to a group of homeowners who had gathered like they were watching some sort of live drama series. Then came the moment I was expecting, but still dreaded. At around 1 p.m., a familiar ping sounded on my phone, a notification from the county clerk's office. I opened the email, and my stomach dropped. The HOA had filed a formal complaint, not against me, against the county. It was a 3-page document claiming that the county had failed to enforce community development integration standards by refusing to recognize the HOA's rightful jurisdiction over my ranch. The wording was so dramatic it could have been a movie script. They alleged that I was obstructing legal community access, I was creating dangerous conditions, I was violating unity directives. The HOA had been granted implied territorial rights. What were they? The British Empire? I scrolled through the rest of the complaint. Every sentence was worse than the last. Margaret wasn't just doubling down. She was trying to rewrite reality itself. I immediately called Curtis. He picked up mid-laugh. "Let me guess. The HOA declaration of war arrived. You read it already." "Oh yeah," he said. "They CC'd my office." My assistant read it and burst out laughing. She said, and I quote, "This reads like Margaret dictating it while drinking boxed wine." I exhaled sharply. "So what do? We fight back harder," he said. "And Jack, I think it's time for the nuclear option." I straightened. "Nuclear option, yes. We're going to make the financial consequences of their stupidity so catastrophic that the homeowners will revolt before Margaret can say the word jurisdiction." I grinned slowly. "I'm listening." Curtis explained everything in meticulous detail. We would file a counterclaim stating that if the HOA insisted my ranch was part of their territory, then they were responsible for 20 years of unpaid HOA dues. My bill alone was over $200K, 20 years of unpaid land, maintenance fees, liability, insurance for every incident on my property, fence repair, road upkeep, back taxes, and projected annual assessments. Total cost, over $500,000. I nearly dropped the phone. "Curtis," I said, "they can't pay that." "Exactly," he replied. "That's why this is the nuclear option. The homeowners will tear Margaret apart the moment they see those numbers." "What do I do in the meantime?" I asked. "Sit back," he said, "and let Margaret hang herself." I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in weeks, not because the fight was over, it wasn't, but because now I had a strategy, a plan, a way forward. And the moment I stepped outside to get some air, the perfect opportunity fell right into my lap. A group of homeowners, about 15 of them, stood at the edge of my property. They weren't trespassing this time. They were waiting for me. Some held copies of the county complaint. Others had their HOA fee statements. One of them, a middle-aged man with a stressed-out look, stepped forward. "Jack," he said nervously, "is this true? If the HOA takes your land, we're responsible for all these costs." I nodded. Every word. A wave of panic rippled through the group. "But Margaret said it wouldn't cost anything. She told us it would be good for the neighborhood. I can't afford. Higher dues, my mortgage already went up." A woman with thick glasses stepped closer. "Jack, what do you want us to do?" I looked at them. These tired, frustrated neighbors who had been dragged into a war none of them asked for. And I finally said the truth. "Hold your president accountable." They exchanged looks, angry, exhausted, fed up. And I knew it had begun. The rebellion. They weren't angry at me anymore. They weren't blind. They weren't fooled. They were turning. And Margaret had no idea how badly things were about to fall apart. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and cast a fiery orange glow across my ranch, I sat back on my porch and watched the electric fence hum quietly. It wasn't just a barrier anymore. It was a symbol, a line Margaret had tried and failed to cross, and she was about to pay for it. I didn't have to wait long for the rebellion to erupt. The next 48 hours were some of the most chaotic, absurd, and honestly entertaining hours I'd ever witnessed in this community. You could feel the tension spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. Whispered conversations at mailboxes, homeowners pacing their driveways with paperwork in hand, angry texts flying through group chats like bullets. Margaret had lost control. She just didn't know it yet. Late Tuesday afternoon, I received a message from a neighbor I barely knew, a quiet guy named Derek, who usually kept to himself. The text was short: HOA emergency meeting tonight. You should be there. Trust me. I didn't respond. I simply grabbed my jacket, made sure my cameras were armed, and drove toward the community clubhouse. As I approached, I saw a line of cars filling up every curb within 3 blocks. People were pouring into the building like they were attending a political rally, not an HOA meeting. I parked off to the side, watching silently as clusters of angry homeowners huddled together. Bits of conversation drifted toward me. She lied to all of us. My fees can't go up again. This whole land thing is insane. Why didn't she tell the board? A $500,000 liability has. She lost her mind. The tension was thick enough to choke on. When I stepped inside the clubhouse, I saw something I never thought I'd witness in my lifetime. Margaret Dawson looking rattled. Her hair was frizzy at the ends, her lipstick slightly smudged, and instead of her usual smug stoicism, she was frantically whispering to 2 board members who seemed seconds away from quitting. People filled the rows of chairs. There wasn't an empty seat in the room. And when someone noticed me entering, a ripple spread through the crowd, heads turning, murmurs rising. Margaret noticed too. Her jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear her molars grinding. "Mr. Monroe," she said sharply, "this meeting is for HOA members only." I smiled, walking up the aisle without hesitation. "Good thing you illegally forced my property into your HOA," I said loudly. "Means I'm a member now." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Margaret went pale. She hadn't thought that far ahead. She'd been so determined to claim my land that she had forgotten the legal implications. Membership included voting rights. I took a seat in the back row. People whispered greetings at me, some apologetic, some grateful, most annoyed with Margaret. For once, I wasn't the villain of this story. Then the gavel slammed down. Margaret took her place at the front, clearing her throat in an attempt to regain authority. "This special session is now in order. We are here to address public concerns regarding the recent community development initiative. The illegal land grab," someone shouted. "The fraudulent annexation," another yelled. Margaret glared. "Please refrain from inflammatory language." "As president of the Willow Creek HOA, you won't be president much longer," a woman near the front shouted. Applause broke out. Actual applause. Margaret slammed the gavel again. "Enough. We will proceed in an orderly fashion." But there was no order left to reclaim. A tall man in a green jacket stood up. "Margaret, did you or did you not file an annexation request without homeowner approval?" "That form was a preliminary, yes or no," he shouted. Margaret's throat bobbed. "Technically, yes." The room exploded with outrage. A woman 2 rows ahead of me held up the counterclaim paperwork Curtis had drafted. "This says we're financially responsible if Jack's land is considered HOA property. Did you know that?" Margaret's voice went shrill. "That document is exaggerated, manipulated. It is not. It's taken directly from county statutes," the woman fired back. "You lied to us." Another homeowner jumped up. "My dues can't go up. You already doubled them last year." "And for what?" a man yelled. "Giant flower pots at the neighborhood entrance. Those were community aesthetic improvements," Margaret snapped. "Those damn pots cost $12,000, someone shouted, "and they're ugly." Even I couldn't help laughing. Margaret pounded the gavel again. "I did what I had to do for this community, no," I said, standing slowly. "You did what benefited you, and now you're drowning, and you want everyone else to pay for your mistakes." All eyes turned toward me. Margaret glared daggers. "You have no authority to speak here." "Actually," I said calmly, "thanks to your illegal annexation, I do. I have voting rights. And judging from this room, you're about to lose yours." A hush fell. For a long moment, Margaret stared at me like a cornered animal. Then she tried one last desperate play. "This is a coordinated attack," she shouted. "Jack has manipulated you all. He's twisting facts and fabricating threats." I held up the very document she had filed, stamped with her signature. "Fabrication, Margaret, this is your handwriting. Your signature. Your false statements." A board member stood up, trembling. "Margaret, why didn't you tell us the financial consequences?" "I didn't know," she snapped. "Yes, you did," the board member said. "The county clerk told us you visited twice. You ignored the warnings. That was it. The final blow. Someone stood and called motion to remove Margaret Dawson as HOA president. Seconded, another voice shouted. Then dozens of hands shot into the air. People stood. People shouted. The room shook with unanimous fury. Margaret tried to shout over them, but her voice was drowned in a tidal wave. Hands raised, voices roared, and the vote was decided in less than 30 seconds. She was out, removed, disgraced, overthrown by the very people she claimed to lead. I watched her sink into her chair, knees buckling, face white as copy paper. The clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a hollow clack. For a moment, I actually saw something human in her expression. Not spite, not arrogance, fear. But my sympathy lasted all of 2 seconds. The meeting dissolved into chaos, people cheering, hugging, celebrating the end of her regime. I slipped out quietly through the side door, wanting nothing more than to breathe fresh air after all that stale tension. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. I stood there for a long time, letting the victory settle in. Behind me, the clubhouse buzzed like a hornet's nest after the queen had been knocked out. And then the next morning, something happened that made the entire neighborhood stop and stare. A moving truck pulled up to Margaret's house. I was on my porch drinking coffee as always when I saw it rumbling down the street. The sight made me choke on my drink. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was leaving. I watched with a strange mixture of satisfaction and amusement as she stomped around her yard, barking orders at the movers. Her perfect HOA president persona was shattered. She looked tired, disgruntled, defeated. Finally defeated. I should have felt bad, but all I felt was relief, and maybe a little victory dance happening internally. When the truck finally drove off, I raised my coffee mug in a silent cheer. One chapter of this war had ended, but I had the feeling the next chapter was going to be even bigger. The day after Margaret's moving truck disappeared over the hill, an almost eerie calm settled over the neighborhood. Birds chirped, lawnmowers hummed in the distance. For the first time in weeks, not a single car slowed down in front of my ranch. No gawking neighbors. No entitled joggers. No yoga moms with iced coffees and golden doodles. Just peace. But the thing about peace is that it rarely lasts. Around noon, I heard footsteps on my porch. Not frantic, not angry, just hesitant. I opened the door and found 3 HOA board members standing there like they were about to ask for forgiveness after a bad breakup. In front was Derek, the quiet neighbor who'd texted me about the emergency meeting. He held a folder awkwardly in both hands. "Jack," he said, clearing his throat, we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe. "Unless you're here to return my property taxes or apologize on behalf of humanity, I'm good." He gave an awkward laugh. "It's nothing like that. Actually, it's about leadership." I blinked. Leadership. The woman beside him, maybe mid-50 with glasses and a permanently stressed expression, stepped forward. "The HOA needs a new president." "Well, congratulations," I said. "You guys pick one. I'm sure you'll do better than Margaret. A brick could do better than Margaret." They didn't laugh. In fact, they looked even more nervous. Derek scratched his head. "Jack, we want you to be the new president." I stared at them. "Me? Yes," he said. "You're the only one strong enough to stand up to people like Margaret, and everyone respects you after what happened." I choked on my own spit. "Respects me. Half the neighborhood threatened to sue me a week ago." "That was before they found out the truth," the woman said. "Before the picnic, before the electric fence, before they saw you were the only one willing to take on the HOA when no one else had the guts." And added the third board member, a tall guy with a beard, "If you become president, you'll have the legal authority to vote on certain structural changes." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of structural changes?" The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You could dissolve the HOA." The porch fell quiet. A breeze rustled the leaves. My goats bleated somewhere behind the barn. But all I could focus on was that one sentence. "You're serious?" I asked. "Yes," Derek said. "We're serious. And honestly, we think it's the best thing for the neighborhood." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. My boots thudded on the deck as I paced. Me running the HOA. The very idea felt like swallowing broken glass. I hated HOAs. Every fiber of my being rejected the concept, but dissolving one, ending it forever, making sure no one, no Margaret, no copycat, no future Karen, could ever pull this stunt again. Now that was tempting. I turned back toward them. "If I say yes, how long until we can vote?" "Within a week," the bearded guy said. "Maybe sooner." "And if I say no," the woman sighed. then someone else becomes president, and there's no guarantee what direction they'll take. I knew what that meant. They were scared. Scared another power-hungry opportunist would rise. Scared someone like Margaret, too, would slide into the chair and take the reins. I put my hands on my hips and took a deep breath. "Fine," I said. "I'll do it." Their faces lit up like children on Christmas morning. But I said firmly, once I'm elected, the first thing I'm doing is burning every one of your stupid rule books. And the second thing is dissolving the HOA entirely. "Agreed," they said in unison. Well, that was easier than expected. The vote took place 5 days later. It didn't even feel like a meeting. It felt like a wildfire of excitement and relief. Homeowners filled the clubhouse again, but this time there was no tension. No shouting, just tired, fed-up people who wanted peace. The gavel struck once. Derek stepped forward. "We nominate Jack Monroe for HOA president." Cheers erupted. People actually clapped. I stood awkwardly near the back, wishing I'd worn something less ranch-stained. The vote happened quickly. Hands shot up, row after row, almost unanimous. Just like that, I was HOA president of a thing I hated more than rotten fence posts. But it only took 13 more minutes to change everything. I walked to the front, took the gavel in my hand, and said loudly, "The HOA is hereby dissolved." The reaction was instant. People gasped. Then they shouted. Then they cheered. The room filled with claps, whistles, laughter, relief, pure relief. It was over. The HOA that had terrorized this neighborhood for years, gone. No more fines for mailbox colors, no more threats about lawn heights, no more surprise assessments, no more Karen presidency. Freedom, real freedom. Someone put on music. People hugged. A few even cried. The entire neighborhood had been held hostage by Margaret's obsession with control for so long that they didn't remember what peace felt like. But they were about to relearn. To celebrate, I threw the biggest barbecue my ranch had ever seen. It felt like a victory party after a long, exhausting war. Smoke drifted through the air from my giant pit smoker. Kids ran around playing tag. Teenagers collected eggs from my chicken coop. Dogs chased each other in circles. Grown men cracked open beers like they'd just been paroled from prison. I stood at the grill, flipping brisket ribs and burgers, soaking in the scene. My newly reinforced electric fence hummed behind me like a guardian, watching over everything. And for the first time in months, I felt completely at ease. Curtis showed up halfway through, with a plate already in his hand. He took one bite of brisket and groaned. "Jack, this is better than winning a court case." I laughed. "Coming from you, that means something. You really did it," he said, tapping his beer bottle against mine. "You destroyed an HOA." "I didn't do it alone," I said. "The neighborhood helped." Curtis shrugged. "Still, not every day someone turns a land grab into a liberation movement." We ate, drank, and watched the sunset dip behind the ridgeline. And as the sky turned gold, then orange, then crimson, I felt something deep inside settle the certainty that my land, my ranch, my freedom, they were all safe again. No HOA, no faked paperwork, no more invasions. Just me, my ranch, my peace, and no one, no Karen, no board, no clipboard warrior would ever take that from me again. When everything finally quieted down and the last of the barbecue crowd drifted home, I sat alone on my porch watching the stars settle into the night sky. And it hit me how close I'd come to losing everything. Not because someone broke in, not because of a natural disaster, but because of paperwork. Because someone with too much power and too little accountability decided my home was hers to claim. The truth is, sometimes the battles we fight aren't physical. Sometimes they're about standing up against people who think entitlement is the same as authority. And if you don't push back hard, they'll take more than you ever expected. So here's my message to you. Know your rights, protect what's yours, and never let anyone bully you out of your own life. Tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with someone trying to overstep their boundaries? And if you enjoyed this wild ride, make sure you subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories.